Stick tractor?
Okay.
Yeah.
So, this first
Because that
slide
doesn't sound weird at all.
just describes everything I just said. Somatic motor neurons extend from the anterior great horns and synapse directly with the effector, in this case skeletal muscle, whereas autonomic pathways consist of two motor neurons in series. The first one originates within the lateral great horn and synapses in a ganglion with the second motor neuron. And the second then extends to an effector, either smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, or gland. We said the first one's called a preganglionic. It's myelinated. The second one's called a postganglionic neuron. It's not. Okay? With respect to the sympathetics, sympathetic preganglionic neurons are located in the lateral great horns of either one of the 12 thoracic or the first two lumbar segments. Hence the term thoracolumbar. Whereas the cell bodies of parasympathetics are located within one of the 4 cranial nerve nuclei that carry autonomic fibers, 3, 7, 9, and 10, or the lateral great horns of the sacral segments 2 through 4. So that would be true if the organ is located within the pelvis. Can you name an organ located within the pelvis?
Bladder.
Bladder. Rectum? How about rectum?
Rectum.
We always forget about the rectum.
Large and small intestines.
No.
No, that's abdomen.
No, that'd be abdomen. But you could have said uterus. Okay, good.
I don't think of that one.
Okay.
Not like. Just,
Now, we said that, let's talk a little bit about sympathetic pathways. We said that sympathetic pathways begin in the lateral great horns of T1 through L2. Okay? And that the preganglionic neurons are going to synapse within ganglia. And there are two groups of ganglia within which those preganglionic neurons typically synapse. One group are located within structures on either side of the spinal cord called sympathetic trunks. So these would be called sympathetic trunk ganglia. Now, a preganglionic neuron is going to synapse within a sympathetic trunk ganglia if the organ to be innervated is located above the diaphragm. Again, the sympathetic preganglionic neuron is going to synapse within a sympathetic trunk ganglia if the organ to be innervated is located above the diaphragm, like the heart or the lungs. On the other hand, if the organ to be innervated is located below the diaphragm, then the sympathetic preganglionic neuron is going to synapse with one of 3 prevertebral ganglia. One of 3 prevertebral ganglia located in close proximity to the aorta. All right, this is the spinal cord below the foramen magnum. Okay, you're going to have a sympathetic trunk. Extending along both sides. The trunk kind of looks like this with these little swellings representing ganglia. So if a preganglionic neuron extends out of the spinal cord and synapses within one of these sympathetic trunk ganglia, then the organ to be innervated is going to be located above the diaphragm. might be, for instance, the heart. Okay? On the other hand, so let's just say this is the diaphragm here. On the other hand, if the organ to be innervated is located below the diaphragm, let's say it's the stomach or the intestines, then the synapse is not going to occur within a sympathetic trunk ganglion. Instead, it will be located within a prevertebral ganglia. Okay? The prevertebral ganglia sit in close proximity to the aorta. Okay, so the aorta really sits in front of the vertebral column. The aorta kind of runs like this. Okay. In fact, let's get rid of this sympathetic trunk so I can demonstrate the aorta. Down here, of course, the aorta is going to bifurcate. But one thing that you learn, what's wrong?
Nothing. The way you said that, I thought it was funny.
Say what?
Of course, it bifurcates. Like.
Right. Well, it's got
Well,
seven branch down each lower extremity.
I know. I got that. I was just saying that. I thought it was funny.
Now, there are three trunks, unpaired trunks, that come off the anterior surface of the aorta. These are arteries, branches off the anterior wall of the aorta. One of these arteries is called the celiac trunk. The next one is called the superior mesenteric artery. And the third one is going to be called the inferior mesenteric artery. And it turns out that all of the abdominal organs receive their blood flow from one of these three trunks, one of these three branches of the abdominal aorta: the celiac trunk, the superior mesenteric artery, or the inferior mesenteric artery. When you take A and P2, you'll learn more details. Well, it turns out that these prevertebral ganglia are located in close proximity to each of these trunks. So that one of these prevertebral ganglia is called the celiac ganglion. Another one located right next to the superior mesenteric artery is going to be called the superior mesenteric ganglion. And then, of course, the third ganglion that belongs to the prevertebral gang group is going to be called the inferior mesenteric ganglion. Okay, so those are the three prevertebral ganglia. So the idea is that if an organ is located below the diaphragm, for instance, the stomach is located below the diaphragm, well, then the synapse, in this case, is going to be with one of these three prevertebral ganglia. Of course, then the postganglionic neuron would extend to the effector, to the smooth muscle, for instance, within the stomach, or two gastric glands within the wall of the stomach. Yeah? Does that make sense to everyone? If an organ is above the diaphragm, sympathetic trunk. If instead it's located below the diaphragm, the synapse, in terms of the sympathetic nervous system, is going to be with a prevertebral ganglion. Now, in both of these cases, whether the synapse occurs within the sympathetic trunk or the prevertebral ganglion, that preganglionic axon is very short, because in both cases the ganglia are located very close by to the spinal cord. And so with the sympathetic nervous system, the postganglionic axons are always much longer than the preganglionic axons. Okay? And that's simply because the ganglia are located close by in terms of location in relation to the spinal cord. So this distance is going to be less than this distance. Okay. And this is a diagram that simply illustrates the relationship of the sympathetic trunk ganglia to the spinal cord, and then over to the side it demonstrates the 3 prevertebral ganglia. Okay. You can see that organs located above the diaphragm, like the pupil, the heart, the lungs, the synapse is going to occur here in the sympathetic trunk. For organs located below the diaphragm, the synapse is occurring within one of these 3 prevertebral ganglia. I know what you're saying. Pretty sweet.
What?
Sweet.
Oh, I'm not. I mean, it's just a lot. You're not a lot, but
Huh? A lot of sweetness.
I'm confused.
Roll with the cone.
Yep, that's. You're right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are you okay?
I'm okay.
All right, you with me? Do we need to go over something again?
I think if you keep going, it'll add up.
All right.
If not, I'll ask you a question during break.
All right, let's switch gears and talk about parasympathetics. Well, the parasympathetic division is part of the autonomic nervous system. So the pathway from spinal cord to effector is still a 2-neuron pathway. Like the sympathetic division, the preganglionic neuron is going to synapse with a postganglionic neuron within a ganglia. But in this case, the ganglia are called terminal ganglia, and they're located close to or within the wall of the visceral organ being innervated. So terminal ganglia are located right next door to the organ receiving innervation. So they might be located right next door to the pupil, or right next door to the sinus node of the heart, or to the airways of the lungs, or to the stomach wall. Okay? So terminal ganglia are not located right next to the spinal cord. That's a difference between parasympathetics and sympathetics. With sympathetics, the ganglia are located right next door to the spinal cord, so you have a very short preganglionic axon. Not the case with parasympathetics. With parasympathetics, the preganglionic axon is much longer because it extends almost to the organ being innervated. Okay. Because of that, the axons of preganglionic parasympathetic neurons are much longer than sympathetic preganglionic neurons. Okay. Now, this diagram really doesn't show that to the extent you would like it. It just names some of these terminal ganglia within which the preganglionic neuron snaps.
Is there a better picture in the book?
You might find one.
Okay.
But the idea here is that the preganglionic neurons originate either within the brainstem, the 3rd, 7th, 9th, and 10th nuclei, or within one of these segments of the sacral region of the spinal cord. So it makes sense if an organ is located within the pelvis, it's going to receive its synapse, or it's going to receive its innervation from the sacral region of the spinal cord.
Why do they have names for the first 3 and not the last
The first 3,
cranial nerves that are on that thing? Not the first 3 actual cranial nerves, but why do they have like a ciliary?
about the ganglia?
Yeah, and then they don't have it for like cranial nerve 10 or the pelvic.
Well, the truth is that all of the ganglia have names.
Why didn't they put them
Okay,
in
and if you were to go to medical school, you'd have to learn them all.
there? Yes.
Okay, but this is just A&P1,
Okay.
so we're probably not going to ask you to learn that.
Okay. I was just wondering why the other ones were on the picture.
But you'll find out,
Keyword.
if you were to read Grant's Atlas of Anatomy,
Yes.
you would find out that every structure within the body has a name.
I feel like they named a couple of things like the same thing.
Oh, sometimes, yeah, words are used like the word nucleus.
Right.
Can be used in two different ways.
It's meant to confuse
So
you.
you're right.
It's like that.
Now, let's draw a little more detail now. Have you the saying the devil is in the details?
Heard the devil is alive. Devil is alive.
So I'm going to draw several different segments. Let's say of the sympathetic division.
Dr. Penner, do you have a favorite color?
No.
What kind of question is that?
A good one. Don't judge.
I don't know.
What's your favorite color?
See, you have to think about it too long.
When there's a rack full of shirts and they were different colors, what color would you buy?
I wear black a lot, but I don't think that's my favorite color. That would make me morbid, wouldn't it?
Or a green or a red. I'm like not even thinking about colors right now. It gives me a trying to think about anatomy.
Good choice. I like it.
Yeah.
Color.
I was just asking why you
It really does with like the fast illustrations. Dr. Penner, I wish you could like come home with me sometimes and just like draw the illustrations again. Because like when I redraw them, it's just not the same.
I take pictures. Because he has done it. How long have you been teaching?
Oh, a long time.
Okay, he's done this for a long time. That's why he does it.